Why, hello, ladies and gentlemen. On today's show, a super duper crossover with the king of all prospects. We're talking Padres, top 10 prospects, a farm system that has been depleted, but still has a lot to like about it. Locked On Padres, guys. You know what it is. Here we go.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Friday, January 28th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can find me on Twitter at Javapeno, Javiiipeno, or at LO_Padres if you fancy content exclusively about the Padres, because my own Twitter account gets a little bit wild sometimes. And also, thank you for making Locked On Padres your hashtag first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And today, it's a very special episode. It is I'm going to make it up, but probably the 11th reunion between myself and my guest of the day. It is Mr. Aram Leighton, formerly of Locked On Marlins and Locked On MLB Prospects, and currently the co-founder of Just Baseball, a wonderful site, and currently the host, or co-host, I should say, of the Just Baseball show, and currently a host of of Outside the Box with Jeff Conine, and currently the host of the Call-Up for Just Baseball Media. If you get what I'm getting at, this man is up to a lot of stuff in baseball. Aram, how are you doing?
Good, man. It's funny because when I'll go on, sometimes people are like, yeah, so what do you want me to say? You are like that. Do you want me to list everything? I'm like, no, it's okay. So I appreciate you listing everything. I am very excited about the call up. That obviously it was awesome doing Locked On MLB Prospects for so long. And I'm so glad that they have Lindsey Crosby taking over that, but really excited to launch the prospect side of things, because I was missing that, man. So I appreciate you having me on. It's always a blast to talk prospects. And, I just put out our Padres top prospects episode as well, which I know you listen to. So I know you're going to have some questions for me after what we talked about. But outwardly to you, I tell you that the Padres system is not great. But, if you listen to the episode and in this conversation today, because I'm not going to lie to your listeners just to troll you, the system has a little bit more upside. And I think it's fair to say that, we're comparing it to what it once was, which is not fair to this poor 2022 system, just because. And by poor, I mean, like, I feel bad for them because they're compared to what was one of the best systems like we've seen ever. Back in like 2018.
Yeah, absolutely. And you jumped on it right there. We're going to be talking about the prospects that you listed over on the call up. You can listen to the audio of that. You and Jack McMullen, your co-host, cool guy, Jack. And also the article, which we're going to be talking about too. We're going to be pulling from that a little bit. But yeah, it's like for the past few months, you have been every now and then, it's like the little things. You'll send me a text being like, dude, I White Sox like breakdown first. I just want to do Phillies. Like, I got to do all these teams. I'm not looking forward to this. I guess just simply put, first initial statement heading into actually when you sat down and did the top 10 Padres prospects, was it a lot more like on a scale of like 1 to 10, how much more surprised with you with the depth there, with the value there than maybe what you were suggesting over the text and the slant?
No, it's honestly a great question. I'll tell you, I know most of these guys, and I have a pretty good idea on a lot of guys as I get ready to write up a system. But usually there's a few in the back end, or a few guys that I was expecting to be outside of the top 10 that after I watch full starts on the mound or watch just a ton of at-bats and look into the data and reach out to some other scouts, players, etc., I'm pleasantly surprised. And I would say, I don't know what the exact numerical value would be on the 1 to 10 scale, but I definitely came away more encouraged with the depth of the Padres system than I was going in. Is depth a strength for this system? Absolutely not. but it is definitely better than I thought it was. And there's some guys in the back end of the top 10 that I'm actually very excited about. And the more I watched and the more I dug in on these guys, the more excited I got on some of these players. So I'm definitely excited to talk about them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's be clear here. There's a couple guys in here. Not a couple. Actually, literally a couple. There are two that I think highlight the Padres prospects. We're just going to jump right into this. And what I mean by highlight is not necessarily the best ones, but the one that is going to be, the top of everybody's minds. He's going to hopefully debut maybe in 2022, and that's CJ Abrams. And then the Da Vinci Code, like national treasure of the Gone Girl of prospects, which is MacKenzie Gore, a guy who at one point was the top pitching prospect in all of baseball, and for some people, Baseball America, for example, literally falling out of their top 100, which is really wild. But let's just start immediately with a quick thing on CJ Abrams, because I want to get with the objectively, like, I don't think there's a really like much debate about this. How excited should Padres fans be about CJ?
The most excited. I really, really think he's going to be one of the most dynamic players in the game. We look at what he's able to do already. I mean, yes, could he have hit for a little bit more power out of the gate? Sure, but mind you, he started his professional career essentially in Double-A, and really did well. Like, really was good until he got hurt. What I was most impressed by, honestly, was the glove. He was so much better at shortstop than I thought he would be. I watched so much of him just defensively there. The speed translates incredibly well to where his range is fantastic. The arm was much stronger than I thought, and the actions were great. In terms of the bat, he's got way more power, I think, than people might believe. I think there's 20 home run power in there, without a doubt, as he just continues to feel himself out as a hitter. The thing is you also don't want to try and lift and yank and try to go for the home run if you're CJ Abrams, because you could beat one straight into the ground and you are going to still beat it out at first base, because he has among the best speed in all of professional baseball. That's including the MLB level as well. This is a guy that, I think could check every single box and could be a table setter at the top of the order for the Padres and just be so much fun to watch for the foreseeable future. And if he's playing second base, which is where I think ultimately he's going to be, because it's Tatis at short, he could be a Gold Glove caliber second baseman and one of the best in the game.
Now, this is an interesting. You're hiding a little bit your take that you think that CJ Abrams should be playing shortstop. This is very interesting, because you love to just like slander my guy behind the scenes and all that stuff. But I do think that it is interesting that the Padres at one point, I remember Padres fans and people I talked to, like, they wouldn't have quite minded if you trade CJ Abrams for some superstar and some big package. Nowadays, it's like, whoa. Because I don't know if you remember, like, at first it was Gore, right? At first, Gore was the top prospect. The system was more loaded. And now it's like, oh, wait, no. Oh, my God. Like, this guy has risen up. I remember some people at one point were saying they might rank him their number one prospect in all of baseball. He's basically in a consensus kind of top 10 right now, for those who don't know. But that makes me move on to the next thing. Right, and that's MacKenzie Gore. But actually, I do want to ask you, what's it called, about the top 10. All right, so out of each of these guys, we're going to talk about MacKenzie Gore in more depth in just a second. But I do wonder, MacKenzie Gore, CJ Abrams, Luis Campusano, and Robert Hassel are kind of universally believed to be the top guys. Those are the old golden eggs. If the Padres did make a trade, which of those do you think you would be most willing to let go if the right offer or whatever? We don't know what player it is, but in a vacuum, out of those guys, which one do you think that you would let go the most?
We're going to get into the specifics on Gore, but I would part with Gore, not necessarily because I think he's absolutely doomed, and that's something I'll get into, but just because I think the right team will still value him well, because I think he's a change of scenery candidate. But on the same notion, the Padres bringing in Mike Schilt and really a new person to oversee the development of the entire organization, I think is really important. So obviously, I would opt to keep all of these guys if you could. But if I'm trading anybody, it's going to be Gore, and then probably Campusano, just because I think CJ Abrams is untouchable. I think Robert Hassel is going to be a really good ball player with a high chance of hitting. in terms of hitting like his 70th percentile outcome. I love Campusano, but there's some makeup questions there. How he's going to fit in at the big league level. There's some. I still really like him as a prospect and as a baseball player, but as your catcher, having some questions as to how he approaches the game, his the way he is around the clubhouse and things like that. I think that is somewhat of a limitation in terms of if we're comparing him to the other two guys. Again, not an indictment on Campusano long term. And the Padres have some questions to be answered at catcher because, like you mentioned, the Austin Nola "can he play 50 games" challenge. That's a question. But I think the Padres going out and getting Jorge Alfaro for depth, I think tells you a little bit about their uncertainty with Campusano at this point. I think that's a fair question. So yeah, I think Abrams and Hassel are kind of in their own ball game up there, just because of their already proven ability to different degrees and also their upside.
Absolutely. Yeah, it kind of varies a little bit. Your view on Gore, it varies and whatnot, and whether or not you should get rid of one of these prospects is kind of a question for the Padres their whole offseason, it feels like. But one thing that isn't a question, Aram, because everybody knows they're the best, right? This is a triple A. This is Wander Franco, right? Those are Built Bars, my friend. They are the best protein bars in all of the land, everybody. I've been talking about these things forever. You have to try them out because, they taste like candy bars and they're good for you. I mean, I cut it right there, but I'm not going to end it there because what I like about them even more is there's such flavors. They've got coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie. My personal favorite, apple almond crisp. My mom's favorite, cherry barcia. And the favorite of the Locked On folk, I should say, is the coconut brownie chunk flavor, if I'm not mistaken. That is a favorite of everybody's. And that's what I like about them. They're kind of like the Ben & Jerry's of Built Bars. They're really good for you and very tasty, guys. And because you're listening to this podcast, you can go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Remember, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Aram, how about that for a transition? I think that was pretty good. I don't know. I think I did pretty good with that one. But let's get into thanks, man. Let's get into this is the main event. This is the guy everyone's been talking about. One of the things I've asked you a lot as this kind of, like I said, it really is the Da Vinci Code. We don't really know what's going on. This is a movie with multiple parts to it, and it's actually feels almost like a movie because MacKenzie Gore at one point, like I said, top pitching prospect. He had 4+ pitches, right? He looks dominant on the mound. Clayton Kershaw comparisons, right? And I actually think that there's a really interesting conversation to be had about this is what could happen with prospects and how we overvalue them and we get a little bit too excited. But this one is even more extreme. And one of the things I asked you was, when was the last time someone has fallen this much in consensus rank? Obviously, you've had guys who have fallen. Maybe they went from top 5 to 20, or you have your Lucas Giolito's who debut and then they fall back a little bit. But I don't remember a guy who hasn't debuted in Major League Baseball yet fall this far. Is that an accurate sort of statement, or is there somebody else, or does this happen kind of all the time?
Well, it's a great question because I would say generally it's either you have a really highly regarded international free agent who flops right away, or you have a high draft pick who flops right away. You don't usually have a guy pitch to almost a sub-1 ERA in high A and then slow down. That's the question, and also it's generally injury related, right? That wasn't the case for Gore. I mean, he wasn't pitching with no injury designation like it. That's the issue, because the one fall from grace I could look towards and mention is probably Forrest Whitley, who at one point, was a preseason consensus top 10 prospect for multiple years. And I think was a top 100 ranked prospect for 4 straight years, consensus, but dealt with injuries among other issues as well. So it's still a little bit different. Gore's fall from grace is about as unique as of one that we've seen, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? I mean, no legitimate arm issues is a good thing, but it's also okay, but how does he rectify this? What is going on? I think a little bit of it had to be mental, and it seemed to be like he was fighting himself at times. I watched probably, and I went back and watched again, different starts from different months across the season, and you would see a different delivery from Gore each start, a totally different lineup, different delivery. In some starts, man, he was like 89, 91, and he looked like he was aiming it. And then other starts, he was 94, 96 with no idea where it was going. And the other thing is when you're changing your delivery, Gore was a guy, like you said, with 4 above average to plus pitches. But when you're changing your mechanics, the way you have that feel for the changeup changes, right? The way you have the feel for certain pitches adjusts. And so with the adjustments he made to his mechanics, the curveball feel wasn't as good. And all of a sudden the slider was looking better, which was always his worst pitch. And the changeup feel, which was his best pitch, started to fade. And now he's more of a fastball slider guy. So he has to almost adapt to his adapted mechanics and see how that arsenal works for him. What I will say is I went back and watched a lot of the Arizona Fall League. His numbers weren't great, but he seemed to be much more comfortable. He was cutting loose. He was up to 94, 96. The slider was nasty, but he's got to find now the curveball or the changeup with this new delivery and try to find a way to get that command back to where it was. This is a guy that once had plus command. Now we're hoping for average command. I mean, it is very surprising, but I think, he's still only 22 years old, and I think he started to finish the year strong, and I still think there's reason to be optimistic. He's a lot better off than where he was at the rock bottom last year. I think he definitely was trending in the right direction by the time he got to the Fall League.
Yeah, it's just so interesting, like we said, what's happened with him, where it's like he's kind of, it almost feels like you're building, he has to build it back up. He has to level up again, right? This is like the Castlevania game where you're a god at the beginning and then you lose all your powers. Yes, that's right. I'm still as nerdy as you remember. Great game, by the way. Everybody check that out.
Never heard of it.
But like that's what I find so fascinating. And now the question for you that I have, which is a little bit more Padres centric, not as necessarily about his mechanics and whatnot, but it's like, do you think Padres fans should be worried that trading MacKenzie Gore now, you're literally selling as low as possible? Or is it the type of thing where you're like, I mean, we have all these starters. We've got Monahan coming back hopefully this year. You got Mike Clevenger. You've got the guys that you have last year. Hopefully they bounce back. Or like, is this one of those things where we're going to be looking back and being like, oh God, like he was 22. Why didn't we give him a couple years to like figure it out?
No, I think it's a great question. I personally, I think it makes sense to ultimately trade him at some point next year, potentially, if the opportunity presents itself, right? Because I would trade him before I trade any of the other guys, right? That's just the way it is right now. If the right team values him, then it would make sense. I think it would be nuts to trade him before the start of this season. MacKenzie Gore is a super athlete on the mound who I can assure you has been working diligently through this offseason to iron out whatever was going on. And I think having the season halted, like it's over, now I can focus in a controlled environment and work these things out. He could come out next year and look more like the old MacKenzie Gore. And then at that point, you could still opt to trade him and it would be a lot better. Even if he comes out next year and is between where he was last year and where he used to be before that, and when he was a top pitching prospect in baseball, at least there's going to be teams with a little bit more confidence that they're not just buying into a total unknown. I think you got to come out next year, see how he looks, see how things are going, and then go from there and make your own assessment and make your own judgment on Gore. But it's also important not to pit him against himself, right? I mean, this is a guy that struggled a lot last year, but he also set the bar so high for himself that, we were like, oh, this guy's going to debut at 21 and he's going to be a frontline starter right away. That has shifted, right? But a 22-year-old who pitched really well in the lower levels and then struggled in Double-A, like that happens all the time. And he's still 22. So I think it's important to like almost wipe a clean slate, forget the past, and look at it like this is a guy that has had a bit of a roller coaster, but is super talented, and let's see how he does in 2022. I think, looking at what he did in 2019 and trying to just compare that to what we're seeing now is just going to pit him against himself. Let's see how he comes out next year. And if he looks more like a future number 3, guess what? That's still great. This is a guy that wasn't ranked in Baseball America's top 100, right? So if he looks more like a number 3, let's not be like, oh, shoot. I mean, he was looking like an ace before. Like, this is still a good outcome and obviously would be a lot more valuable in that context. So I think you got to wait. Let's see how he looks this coming year. And with how athletic he is on the mound, I think it's outrageous to give up on this kid, especially after what he showed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, look, man, this is just a word to the wise as someone who doesn't know as much about prospects. I always get really nervous when people just give the comparison to like the best players we have. You know what I'm saying? Now I know that the NBA does this a lot, right? And it's hilarious every time when they're like, guy who shoots well, Steph Curry, right? But like with this, when someone was like Clayton Kershaw, I was like, I mean, that's exciting, but I'm not gonna go in here expecting that this is the next Clayton Kershaw. I think you got to be careful when you're as a fan. Maybe the mechanics are similar. I'm not saying that's not a similarity, and how they look and how they deliver. But when it comes to their overall value, you just can't look at it that way, because I still think to a degree this is still an I mean, it's an imperfect system, an imperfect evaluating process that, I mean, you just don't know sometimes, right? You just don't know. I mean, David Ortiz, who was just elected to the Hall of Fame the other day, you know, circa when he's 26 years old, nobody thought he was going to be that good, and then he makes some changes, and then look at him, and then here now he's a Hall of Fame, and he's celebrating in a video that was actually pretty, yeah, some changes, man. So for sure. What was I going to say? And the other thing I wanted to say was, I forget it. It's actually, I'm losing it right now. I think the important thing about evaluating prospects is that just because you elect to keep them mean that you think that Gore is the next beast in your rotation. It might mean what we just talked about, right? Where are you going to be selling low on him and what have you? So before we get into now this last stretch of this here podcast, because I think this last stretch is going to be the super nerdy part when we talk about some of the back end prospects that you ranked and some questions I have for you there. Here's something that has to do with betting. Almost. I had the transition better. I had something clever that I forgot. I've been really tired today. Guys, I want to talk to you about Bet Online. They would like to wish you a happy new betting year as they continue their march to the playoffs and beyond with you. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. And just because you're listening to this pod, new year, new updated desktop and mobile website, you can sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's right. Just use our promo code Locked On to get started when Aram bets the Heat when they're down by 20 at halftime, whatever. I know he's a big Miami guy, so maybe he's going to do that. Hey, if you bet on BetOnline last night on the Clippers, or hold on, 2-3 nights ago when you guys are all hearing this, you probably made a decent amount of money. They've got you covered, guys, whether it be basketball or baseball, football, hockey, boxing, UFC, favorite Vegas casino games. Aram, you big blackjack guy or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, I'm a big blackjack guy.
Big blackjack guy. Don't wait to take advantage, guys, of all those Vegas casino games and all the amazing offers for 2022. It's the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. Yeah, blackjack it's just easy, man. You know what I mean? It's just easy. I do want to learn how to play poker one day, though. I don't know about, I don't know if you knew this, but I used to gamble. I want to get into it because I was told by a very sage, wise man that you need to learn how to play either golf or poker. One of those two is important to the key of life. You need to learn one of them. I personally elect to do poker because it's more every day. I feel like the people play poker. I feel like the 1% are playing golf, right? Like, I'm a big mini golf fan, all right? I'll school you in mini golf and whatnot, and I'll school you in Uno. Uno rules.
No, you won't.
But anyway, guys.
When I was in the Cape Cod League, when I was broadcasting in the Cape Cod League, there's more mini golf courses in Cape Cod than anywhere, like more mini golf courses per capita than anywhere on earth. I swear. And so we would play, you know, I'd play with some of the guys on the team after every game, and I got my game up, dude. I got my game up. So we'll have to test that theory. We'll have to test that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just like how you're really great at Mario Baseball. Let's talk about now, guys, the back end of this Padres top 10. And this is, look, these guys aren't the ones that are necessarily making all the headlines, right? And you've heard some of these before on this podcast. Guys like James Wood, guys like Joshua Mears, guys like Ethan Elliott, who I snagged in our fantasy league that is now dead. We're going to have to restart that next year. But I want to talk about two names that I personally had not heard of until you your article and your podcast, and that's Robert Gasser, which is just a phenomenal name in my opinion, and an even more phenomenal name, Uribiel Angeles, who these are two guys that maybe Padres fans who are listening have heard of, but I didn't. And as a curious fellow who knows nothing about minor leagues, I'm always interested in hearing about guys who are rising through the rankings and whatnot. What can you tell me about these two guys?
Yeah, I mean, two guys I'm really excited about, man. And Gasser was somebody that, you know, was not totally on my radar. I'd been monitoring, watched a little bit. But not until I really sat down and watched full starts where I was like, this guy can be a dude. Left-handed pitching prospect out of Houston. And your classic late bloomer, where in his junior season just saw a big jump in velocity. And the thing is, Gasser was somebody that operated more in the upper 80s. And so as a guy that was pitching more in the upper 80s and, big conference, tough Texas baseball, you got to do something to get swings and misses. So he had a funky delivery from like a low 3/4 spot, and it was just hard to read out of his hand. That's how he made 88 play. But when that 88 turned into 94 to 96 with that same built-in deception, he turned into a nasty pitcher. Had a huge junior year, and where I think he really got on Padres and team's radar was he pitched against the Texas Longhorns and Ty Madden, who was one of the top pitching prospects, in that draft. Ended up going pretty high. Fell a little bit, but still was an early pick. He outdueled Madden. I think he went 7 shutout against UT, which was, in the College World Series. And a lot of scouts started to pay attention to this guy. When you have that release point from high 3/4, really hard to pick up, with crazy life on the fastball, gets a tons of swings and misses up in the zone, and then a nasty slider from that weird arm slot, he is a nightmare for lefties. And then the fact that he already is showing a decent feel for the changeup, that is enough to be able to get righties out. I think this guy could be a legit middle of the rotation type of starter as he continues to progress. The numbers, small sample size, but in low A last year in 14 innings was phenomenal. Pitched to a 1.29 ERA, struck out 26% of batters, barely walked anybody. The command is strong. I really like what I see. Worst case scenario, he is a nasty left-hander out of the bullpen with that fastball slider. But I think in the best case scenario, especially as the changeup develops, we could be looking at a really solid middle of the rotation arm here and a pretty good steal at the 71st overall pick in the 2021 draft.
Yeah. I was about to say that, yeah. So you would say he throws gas. Is that what you would say?
Yes, he is a gasser. He does definitely throw gas.
Oh, yes. All right, everybody. I'll put myself a timeout for that later. And then the other guy, Angeles, I want to know about. What do you have to tell us about this fellow?
Yeah, and this is someone that, Jack McMullen, who is co-host of the Just Baseball show and came on to the podcast where we talked about Padres prospects. He was the play-by-play broadcaster for the Fort Wayne Tin Caps. And Angeles, as a young kid, was 18 at the start of the season. I think 19 now. And infielder, unreal bat-to-ball skills. Lit up low A and earned himself a promotion alongside Robert Hassel. They were promoted together to high A. And Angeles, that's in Fort Wayne, where for 18 games, Jack McMullen saw Angeles. And I texted and asked him about him. And Jack was super adamant that this guy had to be in the top 10. And I agreed. I mean, this is somebody that, is he going to be a superstar? No. But I think he has such a high probability of being a big leaguer and could be an above average one because he is such an unreal hitter. Just absurd bat to ball skills, a swing that is just designed for line drives. He sprays it all over the field. It's a swing that really is built to be able to get those high fastballs that everybody's throwing now. The bat just lives in the zone, and he's got a great feel for the strike zone. What he did between low A and high A is insane. 329, 392, 445 slash line. He had 36 extra base hits, a lot of doubles. Only 4 home runs, but a lot of doubles, and only a 16% K rate. So this is a guy that's not going to strike out. He can play all over the infield. He can play above average shortstop. He can play third. He can play second. I think if you gave him time, he could play the outfield. He's an above average runner and just a phenomenal feel to hit. I really like this guy. I think at the very worst, you've got a really interesting super utility player that puts the bat on the ball. And in the best case scenario, I think you've got a really solid, Joey Wendell type of infielder, which, in today's game, you can't have enough of.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You definitely want to have that. And what I love about this is you're bringing up all these guys, and because a lot of the doomsday thing that was happening with the Padres was like, is all the depth gone? I mean, it's taken a sizable chunk, but I think that, can you say with some of these prospects, do you think that, the big question I think that everyone's been asking me is, can you, knowing the depth that we have with Gasser, with Angeles, with guys like Ethan Elliott, which people can go look up the full thing on him. I love this guy. He sounds fun. And then James Wood, if they were to give up one of those top guys, like you mentioned, Luis Campuzano, could you attach him to the current first baseman of the San Diego Padres. Would you be able to stomach that, do you think, knowing what they have in the back end, that this isn't like, I've heard that the White Sox have a pretty bad system, right? That there's still stuff
Yeah.
here to be able to recover from dealing some of your top stuff.
Yeah, if there's a prospect I'm attaching, outside of Gore, which I still, would be reluctant to do, James Wood, I think, is untouchable. Just because he's so young. You just committed well over the slot value to go get James Wood. He's 6'7", with just outrageous power and a really good athlete. I mean, this guy has like an Aaron Judge type of build potential and moves really well. That's a guy that I want to see. I want to see how he looks and he develops. The guy that I wouldn't mind trading, frankly, and it's early and he could end up proving me wrong, but this is one I'm not going to lose as much sleep over, is Jackson Merrill, who, I know it sounds backwards. Merrill was the first-round pick, and James Wood was the second-round pick, but Merrill was an underslot first-round pick, and Wood actually got a higher signing bonus. So you almost have to look at it like trading back in the first round to move up with your second-round pick to be able to get Wood. That's basically what they did with Merrill. I think Merrill is a high-floor guy, shortstop, probably might not stick there, probably can play all over the infield, good bat-to-ball skills, power that has gotten mixed reviews. He put on a lot of muscle in his senior year, which kind of earned him put him on the radar of teams. But that's a guy in Merrill that I'm probably not losing sleep over attaching if I'm trying to attach somebody, because I don't think he turns into a superstar and it burns you. Whereas, Wood could turn into a 40 home run guy if it all works out. A lot of these other guys are kind of in the same boat. And then if you look at like Gasser and Mears, I just don't think they have the value to be able to attach yet to a guy and be able to dump a contract. But Gasser's a guy I wouldn't want to trade anyways. I think he's going to have a huge year next year. But yeah, I think Merrill's probably the only guy that really fits that spot.
All right. Well, hey, I love it. I like that this turned out to be a lot more exciting of a talk than I think that we thought a few months ago, because the Padres were in a really rough spot, but now it looks like, all right, maybe it's only because it's just not the best farm system ever, right? The castle has taken some damage, but there's still a lot of noble knights lurking inside of it, sir.
Absolutely.
But now
Absolutely.
I want to finish now with something that is, we're talking about what's going to happen with the 2022 season, but just quick thoughts. How long do you think we're going to still be in this lockout? Do you think it's going to be a quick thing? I personally, it's not that I think that we're going to lose games. I don't want to commit to that. It's just more that, guys, I don't want you to use the whole, well, baseball it's the best thing for them right now, right? It's like, when has baseball ever done the thing that's the best thing for them, right? They find a way to stab themselves in the foot. But what do you think in terms of when we might be able to see maybe a CJ Abrams call up? You know what I'm saying? No, I doubt it would still probably happen the second half anyway, but you get what I'm saying.
I'm feeling really optimistic, honestly. And I might be in the minority on that one, but I'm seeing two sides that are realizing how much money there is to lose if they don't hit this deal and get this deal done. Especially on the player side, which is the side that, unfortunately, even though I stand with the players here and on a lot of these issues, unfortunately the players are going to have to be the ones that give. The owners, as we know, just are not going to budge, and the players were willing to drop a couple key talking points, which I think is really important. I would rather them not, but if it's drop those key talking points versus not have a season, I'd rather have the season, right? So they were willing to drop the years of control, but the owners are not really negotiating in good faith. I mean, the one of the things that was crazy was the pre-arb bonus pool, where you had the players pitch a pre-arb bonus pool for the top 30 WAR players pre-arbitration. And the bonus pool would be about $105 million to be split among those 30 players. And MLB countered at $10 million. Less than a tenth. I mean, that's a joke.
Yep.
So that part was discouraging. But the fact that they met 2 days in a row, that the players were willing to drop down a couple things, I think the owners will reciprocate in some way. I think we'll have a season on time. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, just a couple other names in the system that are worth following. I know I talked to you about Ray Kerr, who I think is going to be nasty out of the bullpen for the Padres next year. Lefty up to 100 and wicked breaking ball. Kevin Kopps, I think, is going to go right into that bullpen as well. He is ridiculous with his cutter. And then Victor Acosta, international free agent. I really like what I've seen from this kid. I just haven't seen enough to confidently rank him in the top 10, but by the middle of next year, he could end up being in the top 5. Like that's how much, potential jumping ability, I guess he has with his upside. And Tirso Ornelas, another guy that I think is worth following as well. But I just want to throw in a couple honorable mentions there. And you can read all those write-ups at justbaseball.com as that is published as well.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody, I will link the link to the article in the description of this podcast. You could check it out. If you want to see like the numbers and the grading scale, a lot more in depth in the written version, which Aram spent a lot of time on. And believe me, I was looking while we did a lot of paragraphs on MacKenzie Gore, so you will get all of that stuff and more. But before we kind of wind this thing down, man, you got anything you want to plug? You got anything you got excited about on the call-up, on all of the 87 things that are outside the box? I mean, you're talking with a former major, Mr. Marlin. That's who this guy is doing a podcast with, everybody. I know that this is necessarily relate to the Padres, but some really good stuff. Tell the people what you got going on.
Yeah, we're working on trying to get Trevor Hoffman on one of these days because, Jeff Cohen and Trevor Hoffman go back to their days with the Marlins, and I know they still have a good relationship. We have not gotten a verified day, but when Jeff Conine says, "Oh yeah, Trevor will do it," then he'll do it. We had Jason Stark on not too long ago. We've had some really awesome guests on Outside the Box with Jeff Conine, and then also the call up. We're gonna have prospects across the whole minor league landscape, Padres prospects, big name top 100 guys all over, and of course I'm updating our top 100 list soon at justbaseball.com. And also putting out more team top 10. So a lot coming up, and also a mock draft will be out soon. So you can see who we have mocked over to the Padres in the early going here based on some of the things that we're hearing and seeing. So the mock draft will be out as well. So probably the easiest way to keep up with all of that is just follow us on Twitter at JustBBMedia. And my DMs at Aram Leighton 8 are always open. I try to keep up with as many prospect questions as you might have for me. And I always enjoy talking with anybody about prospects.
Yeah, he'll definitely respond on all prospects things. On regular things from people he knows that may or may not rhyme with my name, he might ignore those texts, but he will answer all of your prospects questions, guys, for sure. Aram, as always, a blast talking to you about Padres stuff. And everybody, be sure to subscribe to all the things that he said there. And be sure to check out Locked On Bets. If you want to make some more bets and you want a podcast that also keeps you up to date on bets, go check that out. Your boy Q, they got you covered over there, over at Locked On Bets. And with that all being said, guys, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast or your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, at LO_Padres for more Padres-centric content, and Locked On Padres on YouTube. Recently just passed 200 subs. Until next time, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies, take care.